So, the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion has been out long enough now for people to finish it and formulate their own opinions about it. And I'm no different. Almost right after I finished it, I wanted to make a video to strike while the iron was hot and people still cared about it. But after getting a few paragraphs into a video about my likes and dislikes about the DLC, I find myself losing passion for the video idea entirely. I don't think my opinions were anything special at the time, and I think it was just me trying to get a video out for something that people really were anticipating for to try and get views out of it, possibly. And hell, this video might be the same depending on what I decide to title it, and I'm going to talk about the Shadow of the Erdtree, but I also want this video to be a discussion about DLC in games in general. Mainly about when they should happen, because DLC has the opportunity to be the best part of a game. A creator whose content I enjoy greatly, Rasputin, has a video entirely about that subject if you want to go watch that after this. But even if the DLC is the best content the game has to offer, a lot of people might miss it because of how you access the DLC itself. And in my experience with playing games and their DLCs, there's typically one of two ways they put DLC into games. Either you get the DLC loaded straight into your current save file of the game as a quest or a new objective. Games like all of Bethesda's games, Witcher 3, roguelites like Binding of Isaac and Risk of Rain, and most recently, The Shadow of the Erdtree, all do it this way. Or the DLC is a new standalone experience where you start a new game for the DLC. Games like Shovel Knight and Dishonored have these. And both of these implementations can work great. Like most things, it just needs to be done right for the thing you're making. And now it's time for a silly hypothetical, with Oblivion as an example. Back in the day when Oblivion was the hot new RPG people were playing, if its core DLC, such as the Shivering Isles or the Knights of the Nine, had been standalone, I, as a wee lad at the time, would have been livid. One, because I would hate to make a new character just to experience them, because I liked my character I was playing, dang it. But also because it goes against one of the core design pillars of the Elder Scrolls series, which is the ultimate freedom to explore and do anything as a single character. At least for Oblivion and Skyrim if you're playing them casually. The Elder Scrolls series, for me, is all about immersing yourself in the world and being a part of it. And DLC being put into your save adds to that experience. Sure, it's a little strange coming out of the sewers of a dungeon and getting all these spam emails about properties you now own, but it's also neat to hear a rumor about the strange island that appeared on the coast of a town and then go to explore it. Now, this also isn't a perfect solution because it allows you to bring your possibly end-game character into a new experience which can trivialize the experience. And while these games aren't necessarily harmed by that, it's just another thing developers have to consider when making the DLC experience. And it's something the standalone approach to DLC has a clear advantage in. The developers can design the entirety of it with the limitations of skills, weapons, items, etc. within the confines of the DLC itself. It's almost like making a mini-sequel rather than an expansion to your game. But it can run the risk of killing what made the original game enjoyable. Shovel Knight's Plague of Shadows standalone DLC has this unfortunate reaction for me. I did enjoy this DLC for what it was, because it was more Shovel Knight universe, and I love the Shovel Knight universe, but it's not a DLC I will ever replay, and not one I'm particularly going to think about very often. Things like the change to the bomb gameplay and having to change the fuse casting and powder felt very start and stop for me. Having to hold the attack button to perform a boosted jump forced you to stop attacking while performing it. And it just wasn't the type of gameplay I came to enjoy from the base game. I also haven't yet played the Spectre of Torment or King of Cards DLC yet, so I'm crossing my fingers I'll enjoy those more. Both of these methods of DLC, not to repeat myself too much, can work great. It just depends on what your goals for the DLC are. And to finally get into the premise of the video and what I think FromSoft did poorly with the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. So, just to preface, I love this DLC. I think most of the things added, like the systems, areas, bosses, lore, and even the overall design is great. So why haven't I been playing it? Or even had the motivation to play it after beating it? Well, I've been thinking about it and how I enjoyed playing Elden Ring and the other FromSoft games, and I figured it out, for me at least. I like to make new characters in these games, whether it's to do challenge runs, whether I'm streaming it, or just doing it for fun. It's how I've always liked to play the Souls games. I like to start fresh, build up a character to take on all the challenges. I also don't care for the way FromSoft does New Game Plus. It's fine for what it is, it's just not for me. So why does any of this matter? Well, it matters because getting to the DLC for Elden Ring sucks. It sucks so much. It has got to be the worst DLC to access in all of the FromSoft titles, if not in games in general for me. And it's not the fault of Elden Ring or its designers either. It's an unfortunate side effect of the game being open world. So what we're gonna do for most of the rest of the video is start a fresh save of Elden Ring where the goal is to get to the DLC as soon as possible, because it's the new content I just paid $40 for, and it's what I want to play, not the base game that's been out for 2+ years now. So here are the rules and notes for this little test when I was running it. 1. Note, I am not incredible at these games. I like to do challenge runs, but I'm not great at the game, I'm just persistent. 2. I will be picking up golden seeds and sacred tears, but only if they're on my path. 3. I'm going to be doing a generic any % route to Radahan because it's what I know. 4. This is obviously not how the developers intend you to play the game or get to the DLC. It's just an example to show how access to the DLC doesn't fully respect the player's time. I think that's all, so let's start this. We start like any other run, make a samurai jump off a cliff, then we spend almost half an hour walking around the lands between. We need to go to Caelid for the Fort Fairmouth elevator key and the church bonfire. Next, it's to Fort Height for the other half of the medallion. Now that's 15 minutes down and 15 left until we fight an enemy. So now for 15 uninterrupted minutes of walking. First to Liurnia to get some graces for Vare's quest later on. Next to Altus, and then we get to DTS, cheese them off a cliff, and then we go to get our weapon. Weapon in hand and upgraded, we go to our first requirement of the DLC, killing Radahan in 37 minutes. Honestly, not too bad of a time for me. But we're not even halfway done with getting to our goal of the DLC, so back to the grind. The next and only final goal we have is to beat Mohg, Lord of Blood. To do that, we either need to do the first few steps of Vare's questline, or get to the consecrated snowfields and take a portal. Needless to say, we're doing Vare's quest. So we start first one having to walk all the way back up to Altus, running in a straight line for a few more minutes, kill an invader and go back to Vare to get our rag. Go back to the grace you just came from, run for a few more minutes, kill another invader, dirty our new rag, go back to Vare, and then we can go to Mogwin's palace. An hour and 7 minutes to get here, and now I'm faced with the disappointing fact that I didn't kill Mohg in this test. Remember the first note. I spent about 2 hours on him going back into the open world to try and get the tier for his phase transition, but the invader wasn't there, and I honestly didn't care too much to figure out why, so I just threw myself at him for a while. The entire point of this admittedly boring segment of the video is just to show that even running through the game with the only goal being to get to the DLC took me, if I had first tried Mohg, over an hour to get there. This is without well-upgraded stats, flasks, weapons, and talismans as well, so the DLC would have been much more difficult if I were able to progress to it. So I want to reiterate again here that I understand the developers do not intend you as a player to go straight to the DLC. Heck, I'm sure a majority of people made characters for the DLC or used the characters they already had in New Game Plus or further. That's what I did. But even with characters in New Game Plus, there's still at least an hour of time between starting a New Game Plus and getting to the DLC, because the time comes from the bloated walking of the open world itself. So, should the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC have been a standalone DLC experience? No, it shouldn't have been, and thankfully it's not. This might sound weird because I just spent however long talking kind of poorly about it, but I'm not going to lie and say the DLC isn't amazing, because it is. And part of what makes it amazing is the interactions with the base spells, equipment, weapons, etc. Being able to bring items into and out of the DLC makes it extremely enjoyable to try new builds out. We wouldn't have that if the DLC was a standalone experience. Instead, I'm going to share my opinion that I would like to see them add that's already a mod if you play on PC, which is extremely simple as well, and it's all I want is an option on character creation or New Game Plus on a system that has already beaten the DLC and base game to ask, hey, do you want a few convenient sites of grace unlocked from the start? This would take out so much of the tedium of walking and wouldn't affect the new player experience of exploring the world because it would be unlocked by beating the game. It goes back to creating something that fits the product you're making, because the way the DLC is currently implemented is narratively satisfying, but that doesn't matter to me if it's also wasting hours of my time trying to play the game. I made a video recently about how inconvenience can heighten the enjoyment, but this is an example of the opposite. It lessens my desire to play a game I truly love. That's all I really had to talk about for this video. If you liked it, I'd like to hear about DLCs that made an impact on you in a positive or negative way. Or if you just enjoy the way the Shadows is implemented and want to tell me I'm wrong, that's okay too. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye!